The $600 billion Trump-Saudi deal exposed what they're not telling you. In 2017, former President Donald Trump made headlines with a staggering $600 billion deal with Saudi Arabia, the largest of its kind in American history. But what really happened behind closed doors? What are the hidden truths, the political games, and the controversial outcomes that the media isn't telling you? Today, we're diving deep into the $600 billion Trump-Saudi deal, breaking down what was agreed, why it matters, and the global consequences that followed. What is the $600 billion deal? First, let's get the facts straight. In May 2017, during Trump's first overseas trip as president, he visited Saudi Arabia. There, Saudi Arabia pledged to invest nearly $400 billion in the United States over the next decade, with total commitments reaching around $600 billion, including arms sales, infrastructure, energy, and technology deals. This deal was touted as a huge win for the American economy, promising thousands of new jobs, massive arms contracts, strengthened geopolitical ties in the Middle East. But beyond the headlines, the deal was complex, mixing business, politics, and diplomacy in ways few fully understood. The arms sales controversy. A major portion of this deal was focused on arms sales, fighter jets, missiles, and military equipment. The Saudi government committed to purchasing over $110 billion in arms from U.S. companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. This raised immediate questions. How would these weapons be used? Could they escalate conflicts, especially in Yemen, where Saudi Arabia was already involved in a brutal war? Was the U.S. complicit in supporting human rights abuses by selling these weapons? Critics argued that the deal prioritized profits over principles. Human rights organizations warned that the weapons might be used against civilians, deepening the humanitarian crisis. Economic impact, jobs, investments, and reality. The Trump administration heavily promoted the deal as a massive job creator. But did it deliver? Some sectors did see a boost, especially defense manufacturing. However, many of the promised investments never fully materialized. Why? Because a significant portion of the investment was Saudi sovereign wealth funds buying stakes in U.S. companies, rather than new infrastructure or factory expansions. Still, it forged stronger economic ties between the two countries and helped bolster Trump's America First narrative. What they're not telling you. The hidden costs behind the headlines and flashy deals lie some hard truths that didn't get as much coverage. The deal intensified the arms race in the Middle East, increasing regional instability. It gave Saudi Arabia leverage to push back against U.S. criticism on human rights, including the Jamal Khashoggi murder. The promised economic benefits were uneven, with many American communities seeing little impact. The U.S. government faced increased scrutiny over its support of Saudi policies and the ethical questions around profiting from conflict zones. In other words, while the deal looked like a win-win, it came with significant trade-offs. What's next? The deal's legacy. Since 2017, U.S. Saudi relations have had ups and downs. Influenced by global politics, oil markets, and human rights concerns, the $600 billion deal remains a symbol of a new kind of relationship. One deeply intertwined with business interests and realpolitik, often at the expense of traditional American values. As the world watches how this alliance evolves, one thing is clear. The Trump-Saudi deal reshaped Middle East diplomacy and raised fundamental questions about the price of strategic partnerships. U.S. Saudi relations. Before Trump, to truly understand the impact of the $600 billion deal, we have to look at the history between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. For decades, the two countries maintained a strategic partnership based on oil and security. Since the 1940s, Saudi Arabia has been a critical oil supplier, and in return, the U.S. guaranteed military protection and support. But tensions existed, especially over human rights issues, the Gulf Wars, and differing visions for the Middle East. Under previous administrations, arms deals were routine but often smaller in scale, and frequently faced congressional scrutiny. Trump's deal, however, was unprecedented in both size and the speed with which it was negotiated, signaling a new era of overt business-centric diplomacy. Key players behind the deal. Who made this deal happen? Donald Trump. framed the deal as a historic win, emphasizing job creation and economic growth for the U.S. Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, the Saudi crown prince who aggressively pushed modernization and military expansion in Saudi Arabia. His youth and ambition made him a controversial figure internationally. U.S. defense contractors. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon stood to gain billions. Their lobbying efforts played a crucial role in pushing the deal forward. U.S. government officials. Key advisors and diplomats facilitated negotiations but also raised concerns about the implications of such a massive arms sale. The convergence of political will, business interests, and geopolitical strategy made this deal possible, but also complicated. International and domestic reactions. The deal didn't just shock Americans. It reverberated around the world. International allies. Some U.S. allies in Europe and the Middle East were wary, concerned about regional stability and human rights. Human rights organizations, groups like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, condemned the deal, warning it would fuel conflict in Yemen and empower authoritarianism. U.S. Congress. There was bipartisan criticism, with some lawmakers pushing back against the scale of the arms sales and lack of oversight. American public opinions were divided. Supporters praised Trump's economic focus, while critics decried the moral compromises. This deal became a lightning rod for debates about ethics, economics, and foreign policy. Yemen war. The human cost. A major controversy linked to the deal is Saudi Arabia's ongoing war in Yemen, often described as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The U.S. arms sold under this deal have been used in airstrikes that have devastated civilian populations, including hospitals, schools, and markets. Over 400,000 people have died due to famine, disease, and conflict. The international community has called for an end to U.S. military support for Saudi operations in Yemen. This dark shadow hangs over the deal, raising fundamental questions about responsibility and morality in global politics. The economic reality. Beyond the headlines. The deal was marketed as a job creator, but a lot of the manufacturing and service jobs promised didn't fully materialize on U.S. soil. Many investments were actually purchases of existing stocks and bonds, not new factories or infrastructure projects. This blurred the line between real economic growth and financial maneuvers designed to boost market confidence. Still, some sectors, especially defense, saw real growth, but for many Americans outside these industries, the impact was minimal. What could this mean for the future? Looking ahead, what does this deal mean? Will future U.S. administrations continue this business-first approach with Saudi Arabia? Could the deal lead to greater regional stability? Or will it fuel more conflict? How will American values like human rights and democracy factor into this complex relationship? The role of oil, the underlying factor. It's impossible to talk about the Trump-Saudi deal without mentioning oil, the lifeblood of the Saudi economy, and a critical factor in global energy markets. Saudi Arabia's enormous oil reserves give it huge influence over global oil prices. The kingdom uses this power to impact economies worldwide. The $600 billion deal was not only about arms or investments, it was about securing continued access to Saudi oil and ensuring the kingdom remained a reliable energy partner. For the U.S., maintaining this relationship was about energy security as much as it was about politics or profits. Influence on U.S. foreign policy. Some critics argue that the Trump administration's close ties to Saudi Arabia, cemented by this deal, compromised the objectivity of U.S. foreign policy. For example, the U.S. was reluctant to hold Saudi Arabia accountable for the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The administration supported the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen despite widespread condemnation. Critics say this marked a shift from traditional American diplomacy focused on human rights toward a more transactional, business-oriented approach. Key lobbying machine behind the deal, behind the scenes, powerful lobbying firms and defense contractors played a massive role in facilitating this deal. These groups spent millions to influence Congress and the executive branch, promoting arms sales and easing regulatory barriers. This phenomenon highlights the deep connections between money, politics, and policy in Washington, where business interests often drive decisions that affect millions. Lessons learned. What can future leaders take away? The Trump-Saudi deal offers important lessons for future leaders and policymakers. The need to balance economic interests with human rights and ethical considerations. the risks of prioritizing short-term gains over long-term stability, the importance of transparency and oversight in massive international deals, how diplomatic relationships can be shaped by personal, business, and geopolitical factors all at once, public perception, media, and misinformation. The media's role in shaping public perception of the deal was significant. While some outlets celebrated it as a historic economic win, others highlighted the human rights abuses linked to Saudi Arabia and questioned the morality of the arms sales. Social media amplified polarized views, making the deal a focal point for broader debates about America's role in the world. Saudi Vision 2030 and the deal's role. The $600 billion deal wasn't just about arms and investments. It aligned closely with Saudi Arabia's ambitious Vision 2030 plan. Vision 2030 is Saudi Arabia's blueprint to diversify its economy away from oil dependency and modernize its society. The plan includes boosting tourism, tech, and infrastructure. The Trump deal was a critical piece, bringing in foreign investments and technology transfers vital for this transformation. Understanding this helps us see the deal not only as a political maneuver, but also as a key economic partnership for Saudi Arabia's future. The impact on regional alliances. The deal also reshaped alliances in the Middle East. It solidified Saudi Arabia's position as the dominant U.S. ally in the region. It heightened tensions with Iran, increasing the risk of proxy conflicts. It complicated relations with Gulf neighbors like Qatar and UAE, who sometimes have competing interests. Environmental concerns in the deal. Less talked about is the environmental angle. Massive arms manufacturing and energy projects contribute to pollution and climate change. Saudi Arabia's reliance on oil contradicts global climate goals. The U.S. Saudi partnership can be seen as a challenge to international efforts on sustainable energy and environmental responsibility. Personal diplomacy. Trump and MBS's relationship. Trump's personal rapport with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was unusual, marked by mutual admiration and public praise. This personal diplomacy sped up deal-making but raised concerns about checks and balances. Personal relationships between leaders can shape policies in unpredictable ways, for better or worse. The role of media coverage and public opinion. Media narratives shaped how the deal was perceived worldwide. Proponents highlighted economic growth and strategic wins. Critics focused on human rights abuses and ethical concerns. Social media made this debate more intense and polarized. Comparing to past U.S. Saudi deals. It dwarfs previous arms sales in size and scope. It marked a shift toward more aggressive economic diplomacy. Past deals were often more cautious, with more congressional oversight. The significance of royal coffee in Saudi culture. In Saudi Arabia, surveying Trump's 2017 trip, multiple media outlets and insiders later reported that Trump was not served royal coffee by MBS or senior royals. Some sources claim this was an intentional snub, reflecting lingering mistrust or displeasure within parts of the Saudi royal family about Trump's unconventional style and policies, especially given the significance of the visit. Why might the coffee have been refused? Saudi Arabia's royal court is complex, a web of power struggles, alliances, and protocols. Reasons for this cold shoulder could include skepticism or disagreement with Trump's policies on the Middle East, especially his approach to Iran and the Israel-Palestine conflict. Disapproval of Trump's unpredictable style and rhetoric, which differed sharply from traditional diplomatic norms. Internal factions within the Saudi leadership who may have viewed Trump's presidency with caution. Trump's public reaction and media spin. Interestingly, Trump himself never publicly mentioned the coffee incident. In fact, he praised Saudi Arabia and MBS extensively after the visit. However, the media and political commentators serving some distance. This incident illustrates how even small cultural gestures can carry heavy diplomatic weight. The royal coffee refusal may seem like a small moment, but it tells a big story about power, respect, and the delicate dance of diplomacy. What do you think? Was it a deliberate snub or just a cultural misunderstanding? Share your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more insights. Thanks for watching.